Photosynthesis, the process by which green plants and certain other organisms transform light energy into chemical energy. During photosynthesis in green plants, light energy is captured and used to convert water, carbon dioxide, and minerals into oxygen and energy-rich organic compounds. Photosynthetic pigments. Photosynthetic organisms can selectively capture solar radiation through photopigments. These pigments are responsible for receiving energy during photosynthesis process to produce organic matter. These pigments are lipids bound to some proteins located inside the cellular membrane and have the ability to modify their bonds from single to double. This characteristic is related to its ability to use light and initiate chemical reactions, and they also have their color. Chloroplast. Chloroplasts are in the leaves of the plants, in what is known as the mesophilic cells of the leaves. The chloroplast is formed by two membranes separated by a narrow space. The external one has integral proteins called porins, which allow some permeability, while the internal one is waterproof and what goes in or out does it through the action of transporters. The two stages of photosynthesis. The reactions that occur in photosynthesis take place in two steps that are coupled, those dependent to the light and those independent from the light. Light-dependent reactions. Sunlight is transformed into chemical energy from two carrier molecules, ATP and NADPH. These molecules will be used for the synthesis of high-energy storage molecules, such as glucose, which will be used in the dark stage. Independent light reactions. NADPH, ATP, and NADPH molecules synthesized during the light-dependent phase are dissolved in the stroma that surrounds the thylakoids, and from there they provide the energy required for the synthesis of glucose from CO2 and water. Factors that affect photosynthesis. For photosynthesis to occur, there must be sufficient water and carbon dioxide. Another factor that affects it is temperature, since if it is low, it can inhibit quantity and speed by making it slower. The nutrient content is another limiting factor. The age of the plant, its genetic structure, the shape of the leaf, and the chlorophyll content are main internal factors that can limit photosynthesis. Artificial photosynthesis. We haven't reached all the components, or at least the most important ones, to perform photosynthesis artificially. This would allow us to store large amounts of solar energy, which could be used in areas where this phenomenon is not visible. With artificial photosynthesis, solar energy can be transformed into sugars to produce biofuels later. Also, chemical compounds such as butanol and xenol can be obtained, which are the main component of materials such as plastic, food coatings, or even fuels.
Cellular respiration. We as living beings require energy to function. We acquire energy by a process called cellular respiration, by which our cells convert the energy from sugars, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins into adenosine triphosphate, ATP. There are three main stages in the cellular respiration process. Stage 1, glycolysis, occurs when glucose and oxygen are supplied to the cells by the bloodstream, and it takes place in the cell's cytoplasm. Stage 2, citric acid cycle, begins after the two molecules of the three carbon sugar produced in glycolysis are converted to a slightly different compound. High-energy electrons are produced alongside with two ATP molecules. These compounds, known as nicotinamide, adenine dinucleotide, NAD, and flavin-adrenaline dinucleotide, FAD, are reduced in the process. The reduced forms, NADH and FADH2, carry the high-energy electrons to the next stage. Stage 3, electron transport chain. Through a series of reactions, the high-energy electrons are passed to oxygen. In the process, a chemical and electrical gradient is formed across the inner mitochondrial membrane as hydrogen ions are pumped out of the mitochondrial matrix and into the inner membrane space.
Now, I will talk about fermentation and glycolysis. First, fermentation is a chemical process by which molecules, such as glucose, are broken down anaerobically. More broadly, fermentation is a foaming that occurs during the manufacture of wine and beer, a process at least 10,000 years old. The frothing results from the evolution of carbon dioxide gas, though this was not recognized until the 17th century. French chemist and microbiologist Louis Pasteur in the 19th century used this term fermentation in another sense to describe the changes brought about by yeast and other microorganisms that were growing in the absence of air. He also recognized that ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide are not the only products of the fermentation. Now I will talk about glycolysis. Fermentation is possible thanks to the glycolysis. Thanks to this, glucose can be catabolized. Glycolysis can be defined as that form of fermentation in which the 6-carbon sugar glucose is broken down into two molecules of the 3-carbon organic acid, pyruvic acid, and coupled with the transfer of chemical energy to the synthesis of adenosine triphosphate, that is most commonly known as ATP.
There are two main types of fermentation. The lactic fermentation, which is a metabolic process by which glucose or other 6-carbon sugars are converted into cellular energy, and the metabolite lactate, which is lactic acid in solution. It is an anaerobic fermentation reaction that occurs in some bacteria and animal cells, such as muscle cells. If oxygen is present in the cell, many organisms will bypass fermentation and undergo cellular respiration. We can add the production of yogurt and cheese. Then we have the alcoholic fermentation, which is a complex biochemical process during which yeast convert sugars to ethanol, carbon dioxide, and other metabolic byproducts that contribute to the chemical composition and sensorial properties of the fermented foodstuffs. Alcoholic fermentation is the basis for the manufacturing of alcoholic beverages such as wine and beer.
Now, let's talk about the differences between photosynthesis, cellular respiration, and fermentation. Talking about where these methods are carried out, we have that the photosynthesis is carried out in chloroplast. Cellular respiration is performed in the mitochondria, and in fermentation, all reaction occurs in the cell cytoplasm. Now we have that in the photosynthesis, oxygen is released into the atmosphere, while in the cellular respiration it is removed from the air. But in the case of fermentation, oxygen is not required. Carbon dioxide is consumed from the air in the case of photosynthesis, while in cellular respiration it is removed. In fermentation, carbon dioxide is generated and released from ethanol fermentation, but in the lactic acid does not produce carbon dioxide. In photosynthesis, water is consumed, while in cellular respiration it is produced, but in fermentation, water molecules are not produced. Food is produced in photosynthesis. In cellular respiration, they disintegrate and consume food, and in fermentation, carbon dioxide and lactic acid are produced. Energy is consumed and stored in photosynthesis, while in cellular respiration it is released. In fermentation, the net energy gain is 2 ATP molecules or glucose molecules. Photosynthesis is the one that transforms light energy into chemical energy, while cellular respiration transforms chemical energy into heat and usable energy. And fermentation breaks down the molecule to release the energy so it can be transferred to an ATP molecule.
Photosynthesis and cellular respiration, the two processes are similar in that they both produce energy. Albeit in two different forms, they are different in the photosynthesis assembles the glucose molecule, while cellular respiration takes it apart. Photosynthesis and cell respiration both involve the production of chemical energy, ATP. In photosynthesis, ATP is produced via light energy photophosphorylation and used to make organic molecules. In cell respiration, ATP is produced by breaking down organic molecules. In both cases, the production of ATP involves an electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. In photosynthesis, electrons are donated by chlorophyll and protons accumulate within the lumen of thylakoid. Cell respiration, electrons are donated by hydrogen. Carriers and protons accumulate in the intermembrane space. The cellular respiration and fermentation are alike in that they both begin with a series of reactions known as glycolysis, which breaks glucose molecules into similar protein molecules.